Good morning, everyone. Last week we finished reading about Savitri's discovery of the cosmic spirit and the cosmic consciousness. And now the next step. Now she's done all the preparation, everything. Now she is faced with the day on which Satyavan must die. And this next canto is numbered Canto 3. There's an explanation of that in the footnote at the bottom, that this canto, the single canto of the Book of Death, was only lightly revised by Sri Aurobindo, and it is based on a very early version of Savitri, in which this death in the forest was Canto 3. And so the editors have kept that title in reminder of this fact.
It's right after this.
It's interesting that from the very beginning of the poem, we have seen Savitri awakening on the day when Satyavan must die. Cantos 1 and 2 are focused on that day, or this day. And if we have a look at Canto 2 of Book 1, then we can see that it parallels what we are now about to read. The first canto is called The Symbol Dawn. Savitri awakes on the first day. And Canto 2, which is the next one, comes on page 11. It's the beginning of the canto, The Issue, which tells us the whole background of this story. Why is Savitri waking up now to the death of Satyavan? And it's recorded there that as she wakes up, she remembers everything that has happened to her since her youth until this day. It all runs past her consciousness, everything that has happened, from the meeting with Satyavan in the forest, and the attempt by her parents to persuade her not to marry Satyavan, the meeting with Satyavan. All this has been already told in this vast flashback, which starts here at the beginning of the poem. And now we're coming to the end of that flashback. We're back at this same moment when Savitri awakens in the forest. Sri Aurobindo chose not to revise this canto very much. He seems to have added only 10 or 15 lines to this shortest canto in the whole poem. But of course it's a crucial canto because it tells of the death in the forest. This is the moment she has been preparing for. And we've heard the whole story from the beginning of Canto 2 of Book 1. Now that same day is taken up again in the narration. Would you like to read, Marie-Ange?
What canto are we in? What page are we in?
It is page 561.
561?
Yeah, but there's no page number on that.
On that page, right, yeah. So you have to look at the next page where it says 562, but we're going to start reading on page 561. And we'll read, we'll read first from the title, yes.
Death in the forest. Now it was here in this great golden dawn. By her still deep sleeping husband laying, she gazed into her past as one about to die, looks back upon the sunlit fields of life, where he too ran and sported with the rest, lifting his head above the huge dark stream into whose depths he must forever plunge. All she had been and done, she lived again. The whole year in a swift and eddying grace of memories swept through her and fled away into the irrecoverable past. Then silent she was, and service done, bowed down to the great goddess simply carved by Satyavan upon a forest stone. What prayer she breathed her soul and dug anew. Perhaps she felt in the dim forest huge the infinite mother watching over her child. Perhaps she shrouded the shrouded voice spoke some still word.
Thank you. If you want to have a look at the beginning of Canto 2, we can go back there to page 11. This same moment is described differently, slightly differently. I'll read these first few lines. A while, withdrawn in secret fields of thought, as she wakes up, her mind moved in a many-imaged past that lived again and saw its end approach. Dying, it lived imperishably in her. Transient and vanishing from transient eyes, invisible, a fateful ghost of self, it bore the future on its phantom breast. Along the fleeting events, far backward trail, regressed the stream of the insistent hours. And on the bank of the mysterious flood, peopled with well-loved forms now seen no more, and the subtle images of things that were, her witness spirit stood, reviewing time. All that she once had hoped and dreamed and been flew past her, eagle-winged through memory's skies. As in a many-hued, flaming inner dawn, her life's broad highways and its sweet bypaths lay mapped to her sun-clear recording view from the bright country of her childhood's days and the blue mountains of her soaring youth and the paradise groves and peacock wings of love, to joy clutched under the silent shadow of doom in a last turn where heaven raced with hell. 12 passionate months led in a day of fate. And this is that day of fate. So the first line of this canto, Death in the Forest, says, now it was here, this day of fate that Savitri has been preparing for the last 12 months. Don, would you read on from line 12?
Delighted.
Yes.
Then silently she rose and, service done, bowed down to the great goddess simply carved by Satyavan upon a forest stone. What prayer she breathed her soul, and Durga knew. Perhaps she felt in the dim forest huge, the infinite mother watching over her child. Perhaps the shrouded voice spoke still word. At last she came to the pale mother queen. She spoke, but with guarded lips and tranquil face, lest some stray word or some betraying look should let pass into the mother's unknowing breast, slaying all happiness and need to live. A dire foreknowledge of the grief to come. Only she needed utterance, passage found. Only she needed utterance, passage found. All else she pressed back into her anguished heart and forced upon her speech an outward peace.
Yes. This is the next step. She's going to ask Satyavan's mother to give her permission to accompany him into the forest for the very first time in this whole 1 year that she's been living in that forest hermitage. She's never gone into the forest with Satyavan. Now, on this day that she alone knows is the day when Satyavan must die, she's going to ask his mother for permission to accompany him into the forest. Is it all clear? Anybody wants to ask anything? So what does she say? Next we have the top of the next page. Savitri is speaking to Satyavan's mother. Mita?
1 year that I have lived with Satyavan, here on the emerald edge of the vast woods, in the iron ring of the enormous peaks, under the blue rifts of the forest sky. I have not gone into the silences of this great woodland that enshrine my thoughts with mystery, nor in its green miracles wandered, but this small clearing was my world. Now has a strong desire seized all my heart to go with Satyavan, holding his hand, into the life that he has loved and touched, herbs he has trod, and know the forest flowers, and hear at ease the birds and the scurrying life that starts and ceases, rich far rustle of boughs and all the mystic whisperings of the woods. Release me now and let my heart have rest. She answered, do as thy wise mind desires, O calm child sovereign, with the eyes that rule. I hold thee for a strong goddess who has come, pitying our barren days. So dost thou serve, even as a slave might, yet art thou beyond all that thou doest, all our minds conceive, like the strong sun that serves earth from above.
So Satyavan's mother is a very appreciative and generous mother-in-law, no? Very kindly. With gratitude, she speaks to Savitri and credits her with great wisdom and power. Anandi.
Yes. Then the doomed husband and the woman who knew went with linked heart into that solemn world where beauty and grandeur and spoke and dream, where nature's mystic silence could be felt, communing with the secrecy of God. Beside her, Satyavan walked full of joy, because she moved with him through his green hands. He showed her all the forest rich flowers, innumerable of every odor and hue, and soft, thick clinging creepers, red and green, and strange, rich plumaged birds to every cry that hunted sweetly distant, both replied with the shrill singer's name more sweetly called. He spoke of all the things he loved. They were his bodybuilds, comrades, and his playfellows, coevals and companions of his life. Here, in this world whose every mood he knew, their thoughts reached to the common mind and blank. He shared to every wild emotion felt an answer. Deeply she listened, but to hear the voice that soon would cease from tender words and treasure its sweet cadence and beloved, for lonely memory were known by her walked, and the beloved voice could speak no more.
So Satyavan is so happy to have Savitri with him for the first time, no? And he can show her all the places that he loves and tell her about the birds and the plants. He can echo the songs of the birds. He spoke of all the things he loved because he has grown up in this forest. These were his boyhood's comrades and playfellows, the creatures of the forest, no? Co-evils and companions of his life, as if they are the same age as he is. He has grown up with them. Savitri is listening, but she's not listening at all to what he's saying. She's only listening to the sound of his voice, because she knows that soon he will have to stop speaking, that she won't be able to hear that voice anymore. So every word that he speaks, she's carrying into her heart. She's not thinking about the meaning of the words that he's saying. She thinks about death, not life. Or she's thinking about the lone end of life. Do you like to read, Suresh? No? Karen?
But little dwelt her mind upon their sense of death, not life, she thought, or life's lone end. Love in her bosom hurt with the jagged edges of anguish, moaned at every step, with pain, crying, now perhaps his voice will cease forever. Even by some vague touch, oppressed, sometimes her eyes looked round as if their orbs might see the dim and dreadful gods approach. But Satyavan had paused. He meant to finish his labor here, that happy, linked, uncaring. They too might wander free in the green deep, primeval mystery of the forest heart. A tree that raised its tranquil head to heaven, luxuriating in verdure, summoning the breeze with amorous wideness of its boughs, he chose, and with his steel assailed the arm, brown, rough and strong, hidden in its emerald dress. Wordless but near she watched, no turn to lose of the bright face and body which she loved. Her life was now in seconds, not in hours, and every moment she economized like a pale merchant. Sorry, it's too much. So,
Do you want to carry on, or will you'll stop there? Helmut.
Her life was now in seconds, not in hours.
And every moment she economized like a pale merchant, leaned above his store, the miser of his poor remaining gold. But Satyavan wielded a joyous axe. He sang high, snatched of a sage's chant that pealed of conquered death and demon slain, and sometimes paused to cry to her sweet speech of love and mockery, tenderer than love. She like a pantheress leaped upon his words and carried them into her cavern heart. But as he worked, his doom upon him came. The violent and hungry hounds of pain traveled through his body, biting as they passed silently, and all his suffering breath besieged, strove to rend life's strong, hard cords and be free. Then helped, as if a beast had left its prey, a moment in a wave of rich relief, reborn to strength, and happy ease he stood, rejoicing, and resumed his confident toil, but with less seeing strokes. Now the great woodsman hewed at him, and his labor ceased. Lifting his arm, he flung away the poignant axe, far from him like an instrument of pain.
Tinaka.
She came to him in silent anguish, at last, and he cried to her, Savitri, a pain cleaves through my head and breast, as if the axe were piercing it, and not a living branch. Such agony rends me as the tree must feel when it is sundered and must lose its life. A while let me lay my head upon thy lap, and guard me with thy hands from evil fate. Perhaps because thou touchest, death may pass.
Then Savitri sat under branches white, cool, green against the sun, not the hurt tree which has keen axe-head cloven, but she shunned. But leaned beneath a fortunate kingly trunk, she guarded him in her bosom, and strove to soothe his anguished brow and body with her hands. All grief and fear were dead within her now, and a great calm had fallen. The wish to lessen his suffering, the impulse that opposes pain, were the only mortal feeling left. It passed. Griefless and strong, she waited like the gods.
Rani, would you read?
But now the sweet familiar hue was changed into a tarnished grayness, and his eyes brimmed over, forsaken of the clear light she loved.
Only the dull and physical mind was left, vacant of the bright spirit's luminous gaze. But once, before it faded wholly back, he cried out in a clinging last despair, "Savitri, Savitri, oh Savitri, lean down my soul and kiss me while I die." And even as her pallid lips pressed his failed, losing last sweetness of response. His cheek pressed down her golden arm. She sought his mouth still with her living mouth, as if she could persuade his soul back with her kiss, then grew aware they were no more alone.
Larry?
Something had come there, conscious, vast, and dire. Near her she felt a silent shade immense, chilling the noon with darkness for its bath. An awful hush had fallen upon the place. There was no cry of birds, no voice of beasts. A terror and an anguish filled the world, as if annihilation's mystery had taken a sensible form. A cosmic mind looked out on all from formidable eyes, contemning all with its unbearable gaze, and with immortal lids and a vast brow, it saw in its immense destroying thought all things and beings as a pitiful dream, rejecting with calm disdain nature's delight, the wordless meaning of its deep regard, voicing the unreality of things, and life that would be forever but never was, and its brief and vain recurrence without cease, as if from a silence without form or name, the shadow of a remote, uncaring God, doomed to his naught, the illusory universe, canceling its show of idea and act in time, and its imitation of eternity. She knew that visible death was standing there, and Satyavan had passed from her embrace.
So again, this is labeled Canto 3, Death in the Forest, because very little change, very little alteration was made by Sri Aurobindo to this canto in all those years that he was working on the poem from the first version. With the earliest known version that we have is dated 1916. So it was probably another 30 years before this point was reached again. Sri Aurobindo has divided his poem into 3 parts. And the first part runs from the beginning of the poem up to the end of Canto 3, the Book of the Divine Mother. The Book of the Divine Mother. The Book of the Divine Mother, which has four cantos. And in the last canto, if you remember, King Asvapati begs the mother to incarnate herself in order to help humanity to become what it should be. And she grants that prayer of his. And that then there just come a few lines of Asvapati's return to earth, which he has entered the subtle worlds at the beginning of Book 2, and all those 15 cantos and 4 more cantos of Book 3, and that has comprised the whole of Part 1 of Sri Aurobindo's poem. So now we are embarking on Part 3. Which covers books 9 to 12. In between we had Part 2, which told Savitri's story, at the beginning of Book 4. So now we can move on to the third and last part of the poem, which begins with Book 9, the Book of Eternal Night. This is on page 571. But again, there's no number on this page. The next page is 572. Book 9. The Book of Eternal Night. This has 2 cantos. The first one is called Towards the Black Void. Sonia, would you like to read?
So was he left alone in the wood, surrounded by a dim, unthinking world.
Her husband's corpse on her forsaken breast, in her vast silent spirit motionless, she measured not her loss with helpless thoughts, nor rendered with tears the marble seals of pain. She rose not yet to face the dreadful God. Over the body she loved, her soul leaned out in a great stillness without stir or voice, as if her mind had died with such a one. But still the human heart in her beat on, aware still of his being near to hers. Closely she clasped to her the mute, lifeless form, as though to guard the oneness they had been, and keep the spirit still within its frame. Then suddenly there came upon her the change.
which in tremendous moments of our lives can overtake sometimes the human soul and hold it up towards its luminous source. The veil is torn, the thinker is no more. Only the spirit sees and all is known. Then a calm power seated above our brows is seen, unshaken by our thoughts and deeds. Its stillness bears the voices of the world. Immobile, it moves nature, looks on life. It shapes immutably its far-seen ends, untouched and tranquil amid error and tears, and measureless above our striving wills. Its gaze controls the turbulent whirl of things. To mate with glory it sees. The spirit grows. The voice of life is tuned to infinite sounds. The moment on great wings of lightning come, and godlike thoughts surprise the mind of earth into the soul's splendor and in intensity. The crescent of miraculous birth is tossed, whose horn of mystery floats in a bright void, as into a heaven of strength and silent thought. It's ravished, all this living mortal clay is seized and swift in a swift and fiery flood. A touch is shaped by a harmonist unseen. A new sight comes, new voices in us form a body of the music of the gods. Immortal yearnings without name leap down, large quiverings of Godhead seeking run, and weave upon a pleasant field of calm a high and lonely ecstasy of will. This in a moment's depth was born in her.
As we read about this still power seated above our brows, it reminds me of one of Sri Aurobindo's sonnets, The Godhead, which is an autobiographical account of how in the first year of his stay in Baroda, after he had returned from England in 1993, he was employed by the Gaikwad of Baroda, and I suppose he was given a coach to ride about in. And he tells how in the crowded market street something frightened the horse and it bolted. And the street was so crowded, and perhaps Sri Aurobindo was not so skilled in controlling a horse by the reins. He had avoided taking his riding test when he was in England. So, but at that moment, he felt this presence, this calm presence above the brows, which was in fact controlling his fate. So something similar happens now to Savitri at this moment. I can't see who's sitting up at the top there. Do you want to read? We're on page 572 in the middle.
574?
572.
And 45, under 45?
We'll read again at line 48. Now to the limitless gaze.
Now in the limitless gaze disclosed that sees things barred from human thinking's earthly lids. The spirit who had hidden in nature's sword out of his luminous nest within the worlds, like a vast fire, is climbed the skies of night. Thus were the cords of self-oblivion torn. Like one who looks up to far heights she saw, ancient and strong as on a windless summit. Above her, where she had worked in her lone mind, laboring apart in a soul tower of self, the source of all which she had seemed or wrought, a power projected into cosmic space, a slow embodiment of the iconic will, a starry fragment of the eternal truth, the passionate instrument of an unmoved power. A presence was there that filled the listening worlds. A central all assumed her boundless life. A sovereignty, a silence, and a swiftness, one brooded over abysses. Who was she? As in a chronic robe of unheard sounds, a force descended, trailing endless lights, linking time's seconds to infinity. Illimitably it girt the earth and her, it sank into her soul, and she was changed. Then, like a thought fulfilled by some great word, that mightness assumed a symbol form. Her being's space quivered with its touch. It covered her as with immortal wings, on its lips the curve of the unuttered truth, a halo of wisdom's lightnings for its crown. It entered the mystic lotus in her head, a thousand-petaled home of power and light. Immortal leader of her mortality, doer of her works and fountain of her word, invulnerable by time, omnipotent, it stood above her calm, immobile, mute.
So this is quite a strong experience, no? This moment when a calm power which is seated above our brows, above the head, is seen. This is a tremendous change which comes over Savitri, as it can come over any of us at special moments of our lives. When the veil between this world and the subtle world is torn, the thinker falls silent, only the spirit sees, and then all is known. Then we see that calm power, that Godhead seated above the brows. And we become aware that that stillness is feeling and carrying the voices of the world, but it itself is unmoving. It moves nature. It sees the play of life. And it is preparing its own future and its purposes. It shapes immutably as it shapes those events of the future. They will not be changed. They are immutable. It decides what will happen. It is That power is untouched, tranquil, amid all the error and tears of our human life. It's vast, measureless, above our striving wills, all the things we project and want to choose. No? But its gaze, the gaze of that power, controls the turbulent whirl of things, even if we're being carried away by a terrified horse in the midst of a crowd. This power is able to contain and master everything. Its gaze controls the turbulent whirl of things, like a whirlpool or a tsunami. The spirit then within us grows to mate with that glory, to match it. The voice of our life gets tuned to infinite sounds, and we feel the moments of human time passing on great wings of lightning, and God-like thoughts surprise the mind of earth. Then it's like a crescent moon appears in the soul's splendor, a crescent of miraculous birth, the newborn moon. It's floating in a bright emptiness. So then the thought is seized, carried away as into a heaven of strength and silence. And all this body, all this mortal clay is seized, and it too gets shaped by a swift and fiery flood, some intense flood of feelings, shapes the body. A body of the music of the gods, shaped by a harmonist unseen. We don't know who's doing this shaping, but it's a very powerful presence. Then we receive into us immortal yearnings. They leap down to us. Large quiverings of Godhead, of divinity, are looking for us. They run and weave on this powerful field of calm, a high and lonely ecstasy of will. Our will is changed into a much higher form. So all this, just in a moment, but a deep, deep moment, is born in Savitri at this point in time. And then she sees the spirit who has been hidden in her nature, rising up like a great bird out of his luminous nest within the worlds. It's climbing up like a vast fire through these skies of night. And thus were the cords of self-oblivion torn. The soul remembers itself. It has been forgotten. Now the memory of all its past comes. So for Savitri, it's like she's looking up to far heights of great mountains. She sees right up on these summits, ancient and strong, as if they're poised there on an absolutely silent summit, like a Himalayan peak above her. And she realized that's where she had been working in her lone mind, laboring apart in her own soul tower, her solitary strength. But what she sees above is the source of everything which she has seemed to be in her life and everything which she has done in her life. A power. She knows herself as a power that's been projected into cosmic space. She's been embodied slowly by the aeonic will, the timeless will, the eternal will. She's become a starry fragment of the eternal truth, the passionate instrument of an unmoved power. She has intensities of feeling and knowledge and experience, but all this is shaped by an unmoved, unmoving power. She realizes that she herself is a presence that filled the listening worlds. A central all, everything, takes on her life, which has become boundless, without limits. She experiences her higher self as a sovereignty, a ruling power, a silence and a swiftness, one brooded over abysses, the deep depths of things. And this one is she herself. Then the experience becomes even richer. It's as if she's clothed in a robe of sound, of song, a choric robe of unheard sounds. This force descends, trailing endless lights. This force is linking, connecting the seconds of time to infinity, endlessness. Without any limit, that force ties together the earth and herself. It sank into her soul, and she was changed. And then that mightiness takes on a symbol form. He says it's like a thought being fulfilled by some great word. Great thoughts may come to us, and we may not find words to express them. But if they get expressed in words, they're given so much power, greater power. So this form is coming down and descending into her and taking her over. It sank into her soul, and she was changed. And this mightiness takes on a symbol shape, a symbol form. All the spaces of her being quivered with its touch. It covers her as with immortal wings, the protective immortal wings of a great bird or an angel. She sees her face, on its lips, the curve of the unuttered truth, the truth which has not yet been expressed. There's a halo of lightnings as its crown, and all this enters into this special chakra above the head. It entered the mystic light lotus in her head, that 1,000-petaled home of power and light. That force becomes the immortal leader of her mortality, of her humanity. It becomes the one who is doing her works, the source of whatever words she will speak. It can't be touched by time. It is all powerful, and it's standing above her, protecting, guiding, expressing. It stood above her, calm, immobile, mute. Tuan, would you read?
All in her made it with that mighty hour, as if the last Bhavan had been slain by death of the humanity that once was hers. Assuming the spiritual white control, making life see a mirror of heaven's sky, the young divinity in her earthly limbs, filled with celestial strength, her mortal part. Over was the haunting pain, the rending fear. Her grief had passed away, mine was still. Her heart beat quietly with a sovereign pulse. There came a freedom from the heartstrings' clutch. Now all her acts sprang from a Godhead's calm. Calmly she laid upon the forest soil the dead who still reposed upon her breast, and bore to turn away from the dead form. So now she rose to meet the dreadful God. That mightier spirit turned its mastering gaze on life and things, inheritor of a work left to it unfinished from a halting past. When yet the mind, the passionate learner toy, and ill-shaped instruments were put in her. Transcended now was the poor human rule. The sovereign power was there, a godlike will. A moment yet she lingered motionless and looked down on the dead man at her feet. Then, like a tree recovering from a wind, she raised her noble head. Fronting her gaze, something stood there, unearthly, something grand, a limitless denial of all being, that wore the terror and wonder of a shape. In its appalling eyes, the tenebrous form bore the deep pity of destroying gods. A sorrowful irony curved the dreadful lips that speak the word of doom, eternal night in the dire beauty of an immortal face, pitying a rose, receiving all that lives forever into its fathomless heart, refuge of creatures from the anguish and world pain. His shape was nothingness made real. His limbs were moments of transience, and beneath brows of unwearying calm, large, godlike lids silently held the writhing serpent, life. Unmoved, their timeless wide, unchanging gaze had seen the unprofitable cycles pass, survived the passing of unnumbered stars, and sheltered still the same immutable arms.
Again.
The two opposed each other with their eyes, woman and universal God, around her, piling their void, unbearable loneliness upon her mighty, uncompanioned soul. Many inhuman solitudes came close. Vacant eternities from filling hope laid on her a huge and lifeless look, and to hear ears silencing earthly sounds, the sad and formidable voice arose, which seemed to hold the verse worlds. Unclasp, it cried, thy passionate influence and relax, O slave of nature, changing tool of changeless law, who vainly risks rebellion to my yoke. Thy elemental grasp, weep and forget. Entomb thy passion in its living grave. Leave now the once loved spirit's battling robe. Pass slowly back to thy vain life on earth. It ceased, she moved not, and it spoke again, lowered its mighty key to human chords. Yet a dread cry behind the uttered sounds, echoing all sadness and immortal scorn, moaned like a hunger of far-wandering waves. Wilt thou forever keep thy passionate hold, thyself a creature doomed like him to pass, denying his soul death's calm and silent rest? Relax thy grasp. This body is earth's and thine. His spirit now belongs to a greater home. Woman, thy husband suffers. Savitri drew back her heart's force, that clasped his body still, where from her lap renounced on the smooth grass. Softly it lay, as often before in sleep, when from their crouch she rose in the white dawn, called by her daily tasks. Now too, as if called, she rose and stood guarded in lonely strength, like one who drops his mantle for a race, and waits the signal motionless. She knew not to what course, her spirit above on the crypt summit of her secret form, like one left sentinel on a mountain crest, a fiery-fruited splendor puissant winged, watch flaming silent with her voiceless soul, like a still sail upon the windless sea. Wild passionless it rode, and anchored mind, waiting what far-reached impulse could arise, out of the eternal depths, and cast its search.
Thank you. Thank you. So, of course, when death tells her that Satyavan is suffering, she has to release him and let him move freely.
So she draws back that force, that will of her heart, which is holding him still. It's the body is lying on the smooth grass. It's often lain beside her like that before, no? And she would get up in the morning, called by her daily task, and leave Satyavan sleeping or lying. So, but now she stands up. She stands up, gathers all her strength. It's like somebody preparing, an athlete preparing for a race, waiting for the signal, with all his swiftness held ready. Waiting for the signal, motionlessly swift. All the speed that's there in the potential in the body is held waiting the signal to move. She doesn't know where she will be led now. Her spirit is above her, watching, silent, and her soul is like a still sail upon a windless sea, a boat not moving. It's riding at anchor, waiting to see what kind of wave or surge is going to come and carry it. That far-ridged impulse will come out of eternal depths and indicate the direction which is to be taken. I would like us to stop there for this morning, unless anybody has any questions, pressing questions. Yes? No? Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.
pallid lips pressed his veiled, losing last to sweetness was gone. His cheek pressed down her golden arm. She sought his mouth still with her living mouth, as if she could persuade his soul back with her kiss. Then go aware they were no more alone. Something had come there, conscious, vast and dark. She knew that visible death was standing there,